Welcome to my first tutorial. Today we will be creating this scene. It's created using Cinema 4D and Octane renderer, and the main plugin used is Mesh Tools from Insidium. So we're going to start off by creating a cube. I'm going to make it editable by hitting C or this button here. Now I'm going to select the faces and keep the front and the back. And I'm going to reverse normals by selecting all the faces, right clicking and reverse normals. I'm going to just turn off the work plane. Now with the cube selected, I'm going to go to Insidium Mesh Tools and hold Alt and hit the subdivider. And if we turn on our shaded with lines, you can see the subdivisions. I'm going to set it to 2. And now I'm going to add a MTL inset while holding Alt. And now I'm going to basically add a % and hide the outer faces. So now you can see every polygon, every face is separated. I'm gonna subdivide it again and set it to 2. Now this time I'm going to add some noise in my subdivider, just so, as you can see, it just kind of randomizes the subdivisions. And I'm just gonna decrease the scale a bit and adjust the contrast. About there, just to mix it up a bit so that not all my faces and cubes are the same size. And once you're happy with that, we're going to add another set, because we want to make sure all of these faces are separated. So I'm going to choose MTL and set while holding Alt. And we're going to do similar as before. We're just going to add an extra extrude basically. Let's say 4%. And I'm going to again hide the outer faces. And now, as you can see, everything is separated into its own face. So once that is done, we think we're ready to extrude. And by doing that, we're going to go to the Mesh Tools, and we're going to select the empty shell gen. I'm going to hold Alt and select it. And you can see, you can extrude everything. I'm going to extrude it quite a lot, let's say 90. And then add a variation of, let's say, around 150. And I'm going to add some bevel to our cubes. Not much, just so it wants something 0.2 maybe, and let's see 0.3. I'm going to add next subdivision. Just to give the bevel a bit of a smoother edge. Now once that is done, we create having the empty children selected, I'm going to create a linear field. Now if it should, it would have applied it to the extrude, and as you can see, that is working. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. So the idea of this is to not have a full or flat on both edges. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a curve. If you hold Control and click the left mouse button, you can add an extra point. And create a curve like this. And if we invert the curve, now as you can see, we're removing our linear field. This is where it'll go flat, but then it'll go back again, just like shown in the curve. And make it a bit wider. So anything between our linear field will kind of be flat and unextruded. And now we can add this to a clone by holding Alt. I want it to be linear. I don't want it to be in the Y position, but in the Z position. Make it 200 centimeter because that was the size of the original cube. I'm going to just add a few more just to be safe. Now once that is done, I'm going to animate our linear field. I'm going to start at 400. And before I add a keyframe, I'm going to change the interpolation, so I'm going to make it linear. So that there's no fall off in our animation. We'll start with 400. We'll do 60 frames, and the last frame I'm going to do 600. This way we know it's looping, because every 200 centimeters we know that there's a cloner, and that's how it loops. So we're in the original position. Once that is done, we can add an Octane camera. I'm going to add it to the linear field so I don't have to animate the camera. Obviously the camera's got the values, so I'm going to reset the values by reset transform. You can Shift-C reset transform, or add a button like I've done, or Alt 0. So now that's attached to the linear field. Obviously we want it to face the same direction as the tunnel, so I'm going to rotate that minus negative 90 degrees. So if now go in the camera, maybe we want to move it a little bit back so it sees the flat position. We can mess around with focal length. I'm going to change it to 15. And maybe move the camera back a bit. Now you can see where it's now extruded because of the linear field. So that's good. Move it back minus 200 centimeters. So yeah. Now, if you scroll through, nothing happens because I never created a keyframe. My linear field, so I'm going to go back to the last frame and do 600. Actually, add the keyframe. So now you can see the first and last frame are the same. And if we scroll through, it's quite heavy, so you can see that the cubes are animated. And the camera sticks with the same movement as the linear field. Yeah, I guess we can start adding lights. Before I do that, I'll just save my scene. I'm just gonna type 1 for tutorial. So if you're in your camera, you're scared you're gonna move it out. I sometimes like to add a protection tag, but because obviously we're moving in this position, we turn that off. So now we cannot do anything with the camera, except for moving the Z, which is not right. We have to undo the X. So I'm just going to reset that. Sorry, it's my bad. So now we cannot move it. We can only move it in the X, but because it's got animation on it, it will reset if you move the timeline. So at least now you don't have to worry about moving the camera anymore. So yeah, I guess we can start working on some lights. So I'm going to add an Octane light. And also I want the light to move with the linear field. The camera doesn't matter too much. I'm going to again reset the light position so it's the same as the camera. And move forward 300. And move it up and rotate it 90 degrees. Let's give that nice round numbers. So what I did in the original was I created a light at the top and the bottom. So now I will give that negative 300 and obviously want it facing the other way. And then if I go back to my camera, and open the live viewer, just give it a second. Start rendering. And obviously the background is white, so I'm going to create a texture environment. I've obviously created my shortcuts, but you can also go to object texture environment. And I'm just going to turn the power to 0. So now I know the background is black and that won't affect it. So what I did, I'm just going to turn off in the protection tag because I want to rotate my camera on 45 degrees. And then we can lock it again. And So I had one light warm. And I had my second light cold. And I decreased the intensity. I'm just going to put them both to 50. And as you screw through the timer, just you can see the animation, just double checking it. So I have quite a lot of flat space here, so I'm just going to go back to my linear field and maybe adjust the curve a bit. So I don't have as much flat in the middle. There we go. It's looking a bit dark. I haven't changed any of the render settings yet. Obviously, we want to change it from direct line to path tracing. And boom, that makes a hell of a difference. I'm just going to decrease the samples for now, just put it very low so it's nice and fast. Change the diffuse and specular depth to 4. I usually add a denoiser. It's not necessary yet, but why not? And that's it for the render settings for now. Yeah. I guess we could add a bit of bloom effect. So I'm going to add the post. Add some bloom. There we go. Just increase it a lot so you can't see anything. I'm going to add it to 250 and just add a bit of cutoff so it's not. So it's only really blooming in the light areas. And about there, it's a 0.2. A bit more glare. It's a bit much. Just want a little bit. There you go, around about there, let's say 7. Yeah, just trying to see if there's anything else. Save it. So for the texture, what I originally did, I have this Octane texture pack from the Pixel Lab. I had a link underneath in the video, and the material I used was a marble. So, where is it? Here we go. So I used this marble texture and I added it to the cube. Put the cubic. And as you can see, that's looking similar to my original one. Just gonna close the asset browser. And maybe add some more samples. What we can also do is, so also for the material, you can also use, it can be from anywhere. Another example is to use Pixel Bridge. Let's wait for that to open. So obviously they've got different marble textures here too, that could be interesting. Just take this one, download it, and before I export it, I want to make sure my render settings in Cinema 4D are changed to Octane Renderer, because then when I import it, it will import the material as a Octane material. So I'm going to export that. And we can use this instead. You can feel free to use whatever suits your needs. I'm going to stick to the original, but it just shows you different ways of adding different materials. So yeah, I'm going to add a bit of motion blur to the camera, depth of field, sorry. Turn autofocus off, and blur the hell out. Now to pick my focal depth, you can move the slider. What I like to do is in Octane, hit pick focus. You hit that, pick to where you want it focused. You can see it changes in the camera. Turn that off just in case it changed by accident. And yeah, I think we're basically ready to render. So I'll guide you through how I set my render settings. I'm going to lock the ratio and do a full HD render. I'm going to change the frames to all frames. And before I do that, what I also like to do, so now I'm on the first frame. Put that in show picture viewer. And what we can then do, let's go to our last frame. Let that render. And I do this just to check the first and last frame to see if they're matching, to make sure that this animation is loopable. And show in picture view once it's finished. Now if we go up and down on the keyboard, we can see it's matching, besides all the noise, but we can ignore that. What we can do is increase the samples, so at least we know I have a cleaner render. I'm not going to go too much into the Octane render settings. What I'm going to do is, say the render passes I created for this. So I'm going to enable it, choose a location to where you want to render it to. I'm going to call it tutorial. I don't like a multi-layered file, I like separate files, and I would like them in folders. I like to go with my denoise render for a cleaner finish without having to render with a lot of samples. So what I will need are my diffuse and reflection, not using anything else. And also I have been using post, so I'll turn that on. And I'll like a render layer mask, which basically gives me a alpha layer, an alpha channel. I want to add some AO. Check my AO settings. A bit dark, so I'm going to choose the AO distance from 3 and turn it down a bit. Let's say about 1 looks about right. I want to add a C depth pass. So now here is C depth. We can change the distance. And we want to make sure that we're in the last frame because of the amount of cloners and how far the cloners go. And then choose what you think is the furthest. So you can see a bit of a guessing game. Make sure you're bet less than more. I think we're safe with 6. And yeah, just checking all the render passes. And I think that's it. We are ready to render. And we will be back in After Effects once this is done. So render is finished. One thing I forgot to mention was to add the denoise beauty. Just stick that on. Yeah. So we're gonna go to After Effects. I'm gonna find my render folders. And you can select all the folders and just drag them into the project, and it will recognize it as a sequence. And I'm going to drag in my beauty layer and create a new comp out of it. I rename the comp. So this is my denoise beauty. Now I'm going to drag in all the reflections and diffuse passes. And we change the blending mode to add. Now make sure the color settings are like this and that you're working linearly. And if you've done that and the render passes are correct, then it should match the beauty, which they do. So you don't have to render the beauty, but it's nice to compare them, because then you can mess around with the individual passes to get the look that you want. So next I'm going to add the ambient occlusion. I'm going to drag that in. Obviously the background is black, so if I multiply it now, it's not going to work completely right. So I'm going to also add render layer mask. I'm going to pre-composite the render layer mask and ambient occlusion. Control-Shift-C to pre-compose or layer pre-compose. Move all attributes to new layer, and we'll call that AO. Now I'm going to invert this by going to Effects and add an invert. And then change the blending mode to add. And now the ambient occlusion is more accurate and correct. And now you can change this blending mode to a multiply. And as you can see, now you have an added ambient occlusion. I'm going to just take down the opacity a bit. Next, I'm going to add my post, my bloom layer. You can add this to screen. Another thing I like to do is add the Z depth and add the blending mode to change the blending mode to add. We can do a levels. and just bring it away from the foreground a bit. So it's more in the distance. And to this I would like to add a tint to give it a bit of a misty background, but not white. I like to give it like a blue. But I would like this to be very subtle, so I'll just kind of bring down the opacity a lot. Maybe have a lighter kind of blue. Just have it very subtle. I find the foreground to be too bright, so I'm going to add the Z depth again. And just add this to multiply. And also add the levels. I like to use the Video Copilot console with Command Shift, it's much quicker. Instead of going to effects and presets, so Command Shift, and I was looking for the levels. And now I'm going to move it away from the background to the foreground. See, now I have a dark foreground, so our focus is more towards the middle. And I'm going to just put down the opacity a bit. And yeah, maybe decrease the opacity for this one too. And I think that's most of my render passes used. Just going to save it. Comp version 1. We can right click, add a adjustment layer, and maybe add a curves. Just give it a bit more contrast. Or instead of a curves, we can also do a levels and just kind of push it a bit that way. Yeah, that is more or less it. You can tweak it however you like to your likings, but that was more or less what I did for the original that I created. Let's make that a bit brighter. And then if I hold Shift 1 and I put Shift 2, you can compare the first and last frame by pressing 1 and 2. These are the same. Obviously we don't want to double frame it, so I'm going to render it with one less frame, and that's it. I'm still not quite convinced of this. I don't know why. There we go, just maybe have it more subtle. Yeah, that's it, and then you can render it however you like. You should just do a JPEG sequence, and after that I'll bring it to the media encoder to render it to whatever output. So I'm just going to call it master and put it in your subfolder. save it. Yeah, that's it. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please add it in the comments. And yeah, thank you.